Hello, everyone, and welcome to our University Business Ed Talk here today, which is entitled Unlocking the Value of Intercollegiate Athletics, How It Can Support Enrollment Growth, Financial Sustainability, and Student Success. And all this is brought to you by the generous sponsor of our sponsor here today, NAIA. Now for some quick housekeeping items, and we'll get right to the presentation. At the end of our presentation, there will be a live Q&A with our panelists here. You can submit your questions below via the red icon with the question mark at any time during the event. You can see at the bottom of your screen here. Also, this should have happened automatically, but the media player where you can see me and our speakers now, they should be the main focus of this presentation on your full screen. Please feel free to expand the player if it isn't expanded already. And lastly, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who is here today and all of those who are registered, all of you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the slides, as well as the on-demand recording. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers that we have with us today. We have Dr. Roger Drake, who is president of Central Methodist University, as well as Jim Carr, who is president and CEO of National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. Dr. Drake, Jim, great to have you with us today. You may now begin.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And Roger, good afternoon. And Jim, thanks for being here and agreeing to talk with us about intercollegiate athletics and in particular the role that it plays at Central Methodist University. For those of us who are sports fans, I think we've known for a long time a lot of the traditional benefits of athletics, whether it be giving something for the campus to rally around, bringing in alumni to support teams, and certainly for the athletes, a lot of great life lessons that can be learned. But today we want to talk about a little bit different look at that. We want to talk about the tangible benefit to an institution. As demographics have shifted and a lot of times education is being delivered online, it's getting harder and harder to get students to come to campus. Right. And so we know that athletics is being used by a lot of institutions to do just that, to enroll students and many times drive to the bottom line. So at the NAIA, we've been paying a lot of attention to that over the last several years and providing tools and resources to our members to really drive what we refer to as return on athletics. And so we're so fortunate to have you here today. You've been at this for a long time with a few different institutions and for the last 10 plus years at Central Methodist. So welcome, and let's get right to it.
Thanks.
So as I mentioned, athletics plays an important role at Central Methodist. Can you start out by talking a little bit about kind of the traditional role, historical role of intercollegiate athletics at CMU, and then talk a little bit about how that's evolved over time and now what it looks like in current day?
Sure, thanks. First, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here. Historically, Jim, at Central Methodist, intercollegiate sports was just merely something that happened before and after our amazingly talented band played at halftime. One story that always tickles me is that a 2-year starting quarterback back in the day chose not to play football because he became the drum major of the band. I'm in my 11th year at Central, and at the risk of admitting one of my many lesser strengths, I enjoy winning. I think there are lessons that our students can learn both from winning and losing. However, I much prefer to allow the other team the opportunity to learn from losing. Today, we're extremely competitive in nearly all of our sports. We cherish our national championships in team and individual performances. We take great pride in our ranking in the Learfield Cup. And as an aside, the Learfield Cup was actually named after a Central Methodist graduate. But in full disclosure, the most important benefit to our newfound excellence in NAIA sports is the institutional pride and identification that comes with it. Today, I would venture that at least 1 out of 3 students that you meet on campus will be wearing Central gear. Now, I realize the importance of college sports would vary greatly across institutions, but us in rural Missouri, it's a tie that binds our students. It's an opportunity for engagement and involvement that is so important for retention and completion. And I think that's as true for our student spectators as it is for the student athletes themselves.
Well, that's great. And I've certainly seen in your tenure how much athletics has grown at Central Methodist. I mentioned at the beginning student demographics and how those are changing. So can you talk a little bit about how that's impacted the way athletics programs are perceived and utilized on a campus? And then why is it so important for presidents and maybe cabinet level leaders to really understand and dig into that?
Yeah, so not only is that a great question, it is likely the question at the time we find ourselves in. There's no doubt that the pandemic has been the single greatest disruptor of American higher education. Student and consumer behavior changed dramatically as a direct result of the pandemic, and trends that already existed progressed at warp speed because of the pandemic. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but post-pandemic, nearly every college, state or independent, now thinks it can and should offer online coursework. Truthfully, many can't, and those that can't shouldn't. However, that genie is out of the bottle and it's never going back in. That practically guarantees that our ability to attract a commuter student, a student not involved deeply in campus life, a student that drives into campus to occupy an otherwise empty seat, a student requiring very little marginal cost, our ability to serve that highly profitable commuter student is all but gone. That commuter students' options used to be limited by their driving distance, and now that student can earn credit hours, and sadly, sometimes less rigorously, on their own schedule and at their own pace, and for a fraction of the cost that they would have on our campus. So all of us have seen our ability to recruit the commuter student diminished. I just said all that to say that students now, more than ever, need more than one reason to attend an institution like Central Methodist. Sometimes that reason is our stellar conservatory. Sometimes it may be an academic program of excellence. It may be our connection to the United Methodist movement. It may be a legacy student, but many, many times the additional reason is the opportunity to participate in the sport they love.
Yeah, well said. And so, as you stated, things are different now. So as you look forward in the coming years, how do you think athletics needs to evolve, or how do you think it will evolve on a campus like Central Methodist?
Yeah, in my mind, there's no doubt. In addition to the dramatic changes prompted by the pandemic, we all know and dread the upcoming enrollment cliff in 2026, the enrollment cliff, or the birth dearth, as some call it. It isn't a matter of opinion. We've known it was coming since 2008. So during the recession in 2008, when the liquidity markets dried up, the economic uncertainty led to a steep reduction in birth rates. Fast forward 18 years, welcome to the enrollment cliff of 2026. Just as an aside, I was a CFO in 2008, and I vividly recall saying that the 2008 economic crisis would be the most difficult work environment in my entire work life. Then COVID-19 came along and said, hold my beer. But in 2026, we will face both. We will face the lasting consumer behavior changes from the pandemic and a much, much smaller market from which to recruit.
Yeah. So as you're thinking about those challenges and your experiences, both that as a CFO and now as a president, what are the most important considerations to think about for leaders on campus? I know we probably have some NCAA Division I folks out there, but looking at it through an NAIA lens, which I think is probably very similar to D2 or D3 or some of the small D1s.
Well, this is where I get to brag a bit about the great work of the NAIA, and particularly Alan Grossbach on your staff. The slogan or the byline of the NAIA is absolutely true. The NAIA is the expert in the business of small college athletics. Consistent with that mission, Alan and his team have created an amazing tool called ROA, Return on Athletics. This tool gives us an easy-to-use platform to analyze our existing programs' performance, the fiscal performance, enrollment, retention, student success, and a window through which to consider additional opportunities to improve our business models through NAIA athletics. With ROA, we have a tool to help us plan which sports we might consider adding, which sports might be underperforming along a particularly important metric like student success. The benchmarking ability of ROA is priceless. It's easy to use, it's intuitive, and simply provides a wealth of data and information that isn't available to us through iPads or any other data source.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Roger. Certainly something we're focusing in on, and appreciate those comments. So let's turn a little bit to enrollment and retention efforts. When you think about athletics in that context, what are some of the strategies you think people should be considering and utilizing?
Yeah, I can speak to Central Methodist success in leveraging athletics, and I suppose there would be great similarity among other NAIA institutions. We operate 21 varsity programs across campus. The vast majority of those programs also have a reserve varsity team. Some say junior varsity, we say reserve varsity. So reserve athletics is a terrific gateway to campus. Quite often, students find that they aren't quite through with their sports habit, but they lack the physical makeup or the God-given talent to play at the varsity level. We work hard to ensure that those students can participate in reserve sports and have a great college experience. Now, at the same time, it's our hope, it's actually our mission, that these reserve students who are not going to be making their living playing competitive sports will at some point in their college career choose to give up their sports habit in favor of an academic pursuit that will sustain them through life. Before the pandemic, we would routinely have 150 students enrolled on campus as non-curricular scholars that originally came to campus as a reserve athlete. We like to think of it as sneaking up on a reserve athlete student with a high quality, marketable education.
Right. Well, and you're obviously doing some things right if you get that many students to stick around after they kick the sports habit, as you put it. But even so, there are some folks out there who believe that if you get a too high of a percentage of athletes on your campus, that's not such a good thing. Or if you build out your roster sizes, or you have reserve or JV programs, that can be a negative thing. How would you answer those kinds of critics?
Well, I hear that as well, and in some cases, I think that argument has great merit. But NAIA athletics is simply another path to academic and social engagement on campus. It's up to us whether we recruit student athletes or whether we recruit athlete students. The secret sauce is in how we meet the academic and student life needs of those students in our classrooms and around our campuses. At Central, we think of reserve sports programs as opportunities for engagement. We think of them in exactly the same way that we think of our academic clubs, our conservatory offerings, Greek life, many, many other opportunities for engagement and involvement across campus. I think sometimes, Jim, when folks think about collegiate sports programs, they often aren't considering the great variance in academic preparedness that exists across our sports programs. Some of our athletic programs actually attract our very best and brightest students. Sports like softball and volleyball at Central will always be highly overrepresented with students that finish at the top of their class academically. But for all of our sports, because there is generally more demand than supply, we can choose how we shape the academic preparedness of our sports programs. In full disclosure, in many sports, there is an unfortunate tension between athletic prowess and academic preparedness. But in the end, it is our decision how we recruit and shape those rosters with student athletes.
Right. Very good. Very good. I as a former small college athlete, I definitely agree that students come there because they want to do things and they want to be a part of something. Right. So it's great that you give them that opportunity. What are some practical steps that you would tell leaders of institutions to use when they're thinking about their athletics programs? And I think that there are those naysayers out there, but in Return on Athletics initiative for NAIA, we try to put our schools in a position to advance the mission of the institution. Right. So it will be a little bit different for each institution, right, and what that return looks like. So can you Can you talk a little bit about that alignment of
Sure.
athletics and mission?
Yes, it's a great question. So at the risk of overusing sports metaphors, we have to keep our eyes on the finish line. We have to always be aware of where the goal line is. And for us, the goal line as institutions of higher education is when that student athlete crosses the commencement stage. The research is clear. Successful students are engaged students that have achieved social integration into campus life. NAIA athletics, both as a participant and as a fan, is just another important tool to achieve that overarching goal of social integration. If we are honest with ourselves, in today's marketplace for students, it is difficult for us to truly engineer a class. We all like to say that we do, but there is a dwindling supply of prospective students. NAIA athletics is a place where we can still, to a large degree, shape the incoming class. It is one of the rare areas where demand still exceeds supply. Now, some of us use that ability to attract the best athletes possible, period. Some of us use that ability to attract the brightest class with the greatest probability of retention and completion. And some of us, which I think Central Methodist falls into this next group, some of us try to do as much as we can at both of those. At Central Methodist, on our main campus, our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, 62% of our students are involved in NAIA sports. I mean, across the entire institution, perhaps 15 to 18%. But on our main campus, 62% of our students are involved in NAIA sports, either at the varsity or reserve level. Pre-pandemic, the retention and completion metrics of our reserve athletes exceeded the metrics of our non-co-curricular students. Again, it takes more than one reason for a student to come to a Central Methodist, a small, rural, religiously affiliated, basically non-selective, non-affluent university. Quite often, that other reason, beyond our great faculty, beautiful campus, our rich heritage, is their ability to participate in or identify with our amazing NAIA sports programs. But even beyond recruitment and enrollment strategies, those are greatly enhanced by NAIA athletics. But beyond that, I want to lift up the success that we've enjoyed integrating athletics into our campus culture. One would think, being located only 20 miles from the University of Missouri, one would see students wearing MU gear on our campus. I like to say that we have more Bigfoot sightings than we have reports of students in MU attire. And this is due in large part to the way Eagle Athletics has been woven into our campus culture. I imagine we're getting close on time. So, but before I close, I'd like to make one other shameless pitch for the NAIA return on athletics tool. Definitely we have time for that. Yes, with the ability that it gives us to select a comparison group of like institutions along several parameters, or even to compare our institution to other institutions in our conference or in a neighboring conference. We have the ability to benchmark our program's performances and outcomes. Again, not just competitively, but also our ability to recruit, to retain, and most importantly, to graduate our student athletes. So in closing, the job of a college president today is not for the faint of heart. I am thankful that you folks, Jim, at the NAIA have developed this ROA tool to make our jobs a bit more doable. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Roger. Appreciate all those insights. And I think now it's time to turn to the audience for questions. So looking over to our folks.
Yes.
We're coming in.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so now we've come to the Q&A portion of our Ed Talk today, where you can now send your questions in. So Dr. Roger Drake and Jim can answer your questions live on the air. If you haven't already, you can send in your questions in writing, and you can do that by accessing the Ask Question panel that we have right there. It's on the bottom of your screen there. It's the red icon with the question mark. Okay. scroll down here and see we have a few questions that have come in already. So this first one looks like it's for you, Dr. Drake. So at one point you mentioned 62% of your students are currently involved in athletics. And now here's the question. How do you balance the needs and expectations of that population with the general student population?
Yeah, so Central, like a lot of our schools, we have a lot of diverse operations now. So if we consider our extended campus operations, athletics is like 15 to 18% of our total students, but just on our main liberal arts campus in Fayette, Missouri, our student athletes account for 62%. Now that's about half of those are varsity athletes, half are reserve athletes. So the culture change, the social integration for those reserve athletes, that's really very easy because those students kind of view their athletic experience exactly in the same way that we think about intramural athletics and those kinds of things. For the varsity students, that's where I think all of us, our greater challenge comes in, because some of those varsity students truly in their minds want to be athlete students. We have this great need to flip that and for those students to be student athletes. So that motivation for why the student is on your campus in the first place is a large part of the puzzle. But our coaches are very, very involved in the lives of their student athletes. I think I mentioned in one of my responses to Jim, our reserve athlete students actually retain at a higher clip, at a better rate than our non-co-curricular students.
Perfect. And this is great. A lot of questions are coming in all at once. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them before we get to that 30-minute mark. Another one just came in, but I'll just say right now, if we don't get to your questions live on the air today, we at UB will make sure we'll send them over to our friends at NAIA so that all those questions can be answered via email at some point in the future. But yeah, another two just came in. Let's see. So this latest, an earlier one that came in, are there grants that help new institution, start an athletic program?
Yeah, it depends on the sport. I mean, our most recent championship sport that we added is women's flag football, and we were fortunate to still have a great partnership with the NFL to help us get that going. And some of the grant money would go out to each institution who started that program in the first years. We also have other partnerships that can help, and then I'll turn to Dr. Drake to see what kind of grants might be available outside of NAIA.
Well, we have started a few new sports since I've been at Central. We didn't have any grant resources. We're blessed to have strategic reserves on campus, so we were able to fund those startup costs ourselves. But it's kind of helpful to remember that we wouldn't be starting these programs if they weren't profitable, both economically and add to the students' experience on campus. So I'm not really aware of outside grant funds that would help one start a sports program, but because of the entrepreneurial nature of these programs, the funding should not be something that would stop someone from doing it.
Perfect. Let's see another question. So this is most likely to Dr. Drake again. So how do you recruit, in your case, most likely, how do you recruit athletes, especially male, who will retain and graduate?
I think there's something like 250-ish NAIA institutions, and there's probably that many different theories and philosophies on how folks recruit. One could make an argument that we give our coaches too much latitude to recruit the best athletes that they can. We would probably be a school that would be guilty of needing to rethink the way that we recruit our varsity athletes and recruit a better student athlete than we are in some cases. again, like I said in my response to Jim, varies greatly across sports. For us, for our reserve athletes, it just works out economically since a large part of those students' financial award comes from the academic matrix. It's a lot easier to recruit the brighter students. So for us, varies greatly between varsity athletics and reserve athletics, but the institution controls that, right? Like if the institution wanted to recruit only the brightest of the brightest, they could. Now, there's differences in opinion among leaders of colleges of what kind of a competitive team one would have. If they did that, I stand to reason that if you I come down on the side of, if you reduce the pool from which you are willing to recruit, you cannot expect to have as good of a team. But again, those are our decisions to make, and I think all 250 of us do it 250 different ways.
Perfect. This question just came in, but I like it a lot, so I'm going to ask it just because it's a really important one. How do you help those outside of athletics, so faculty and other staff members, how do you help those see the value of athletics on campus?
Yeah, it has to be woven into the campus culture. It actually helps us at Central that we have a saga of being so terrible at athletics from a competition standpoint, but still, we have an amazing amount of institutional pride from even in those days. So I think we've done a good job at Central weaving Eagle athletics into the whole persona of the college. A very important position that we have that I would highly recommend to everyone. We have a staff person. They're a liaison between the faculty and the coaches, and that helps a great deal because sometimes your coaches and your faculty, they're all great people. They love each other. They just don't speak the same language. They don't have the same motivation. So to have an incredibly bright, eloquent person like we have being that bridge, I think that has helped pull the faculty and the athletic staff together. But like I said, we have to remember that they're students first and they're athletes second. We've been very lucky the last few years, and we actually have a few athletes playing at the next level. But when I say a few, it's really a few, and the majority of our athletes are going to be making their living doing something else. My favorite saying about education comes from W.E.B. Du Bois, that there is no education other than an education that is at once for making a living and living a life. And I think our NAIA athletics really plays into that.
Definitely perfect. And I think we have time for one more question. I'll just say again, there's still a lot more we didn't get to, but that's all right. I'll make sure that these questions are sent over so they'll be answered at some point in the future. So I think we have time for one more. And this one will be, what sports do you see as areas of growth in both men's and women's? And what is the role, if any, with esports?
Was the last part was esports? Yeah. So that is a great question, and again, it would vary across our schools. For Central Methodist, for us, so much depends upon the energy, the capacity of that head coach and the staff that they put together. So the blue ocean space for us at Central, we have an NAIA Coach of the Year in track, and historically our track and field sports have been under-enrolled. It's absolutely amazing to me the way bringing one new person in. Coach Anderson has just been amazing, and it's lifted that program up. And so that's blue ocean space for us. We will, and not just great athletes, but great students come from track and field. We do a good job generally of keeping our roster sizes full. I'm a firm believer that a roster can be overfull. I mean, you have to also worry about student satisfaction, right? So there is a sweet spot for every sport, what the optimal size of that roster should be. Your ROA tool that the NAIA provides will help you find what that number should be. Specifically, you asked about esports. Great variance from institution to institution. We've made a significant investment. They have a new arena. We have quite a few students, probably 3 times as many esports students as what the average would be. That you would see in the ROA tool. So I think we've been successful. The challenge with esports, it is so new that there's not a mature coaching staff out there. You know, there isn't a pool of successful coaches with proven track records. So I think we're all struggling right now just because of the newness of that sport. But it's an incredible opportunity for students, and it attracts some awfully bright kids to our campus.
And Stephen, I know we're running out of time, but I would just add to that NAIA was part of starting an association called NACE, National Association of Collegiate Esports, and it's grown from 6 members in 2016 that will be at close to 300 in this academic year. And so if folks are interested in pursuing esports, that's a place where they can go for a lot of information around that. Because as Roger said, it's brand new. So that association is really trying to help people find coaches, understand how to start programs, all those kinds of things.
Definitely. Yeah, perfect. Not a problem. So I am really quickly, I'm going to share my screen and I'll keep it on until the rest of the presentation, if it will allow me to. Hold on a second. I apologize for that. Looks like it's not working, but that's fine. I will share it after this presentation, a QR code, and you will get that in the mail at some point tomorrow that our friends at NAIA would like to share. But first off, before I go through my closing slides, again, thank you again to Dr. Roger Drake, and Jim for sharing your expertise and time with us today. We really appreciate it. And of course, thank you to NAIA. And so with that, I would just like to thank our audience as well. For those of you who are familiar, District Administration, we're the leader, University Business, we are the leader in editorial coverage of news and current trends in higher ed. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to UB, and they stay up to date with us online, in our newsletters, webinars, and UB Ed Talks like this one. And for those of you who would like to see this again, or for those of you who would like to share this with your colleagues, you'll be pleased to know that the on-demand recording of this will be shared at some point tomorrow via email from us at UB. So expect that in your mailboxes tomorrow. So with that, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thank you very much. This was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.